All right, y'all, let's unpack something real quick. So obviously, we had that massive blockbuster trade that happened this past weekend. I'm not going to sit here and recap every detail about that trade. But one thing that I didn't do in a video that I put out, which was my immediate reaction to the trade, was really zero in on Dallas' side of things. I was so in shock of what just happened. I didn't really get too much into what this looks like for Dallas. I didn't really evaluate their decision-making process that much. So I wanted to do that here on this video now that things have kind of marinated just a bit. And I'm going to start off by saying this, like, I understand 110% why Mavericks fans are collectively disappointed. I do, right? This is the guy, Luka Doncic, who your franchise drafted. You guys have been developing him. So far, the Luka era has been pretty successful. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then now he's just gone, right? City fell in love with him. He's like their ultimate sweetheart. I understand all of the disappointment from Dallas Mavericks fans. Like, this is legitimate disappointment from the city, right? So I get that side of things. There's a sentimental part of having a guy like Luka being attached to the city. It's very similar to LeBron James when he left Cleveland. I'm not excusing the fans and their behavior at all because a lot of that wasn't appropriate and over the top, but there's a reason why fans fall in love with certain players, and Luka was that to the city. So to see him just randomly gone like that, and it was random, right? Like, to see that happen that rapidly and that weirdly, you understand why fans have not been the happiest with that Mavericks front office, with how they've handled this thing so far. So I'm going to get into what Nico Harrison said, probably the biggest quotable from like his post-trade analysis or whatever. He said defense wins championships, and that seemed to be like the biggest justifier or the biggest point behind this trade. My thoughts on that are this. Defense does win championships, and I'll also say that defense wins championship in tandem with great offense. It's not just one or the other, but defense is very, very important. But you can know that defense is an issue and still not entirely move your franchise player away. Simplifying this thing down to defense wins championships doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't fully explain why you let go of a generational, potential future top 5, top 3 player of all time this early in his career. Luka is just 25 years old. When you say that when you make a move for like a role player or like a set of role players or picks to bolster your team defense. Saying defense wins championships as like your massive response to moving away a franchise guy, a guy that you are not going to get again, a guy that you are not going to replace in a very long time, that's just not enough to hold over and convince fans that this was the right move. So obviously there was something else here, and there's a lot of speculation as to what that was. There are conversations obviously about Luka's weight. There are conversations here and there about just some issues with his overall conditioning. Maybe there was some type of dispute between Luka and his team and Mavericks top brass. Also, we're talking about the contract situation. He is up for a supermax. There's a lot of different realities at play here, but there's no argument that can make me think that it makes sense to move on from your franchise guy at just 25 years old, right? We're talking 2 conference finals appearances and an NBA finals appearance at 25 years old. The blueprint for Luka has been looking great so far. He's performed. I think he was even the scoring champion just last season. There's nothing that you can say. I don't care how much you try to simplify it and try to make it make basketball sense. There's nothing you can say to convince fans that this was the correct move. There's nothing. There's no reality. There's no set of words or phrases that you can say that can make this thing make sense, right? This wasn't a basketball move. This wasn't to try to go into a different direction identity-wise. There was something else at play here, but none of that is worth, in my opinion, giving up your franchise player in Luka Doncic. And let's go with the defense argument, right? Let's use that and let's act like he's right about that side of things. And he's slightly right? I said it before, defense does win championships in tandem with a great offense. Again, it's not just one thing or another, but here's something that I had to get a constant reminder about as well. Dallas's defense in the finals was not that bad, to the point where you had to get rid of Luka Doncic. Was he struggling defensively? Sure thing. But that team during that series against Boston was still pretty damn good on the defensive end. Even with Luka struggling and lagging behind and all of those things, and I'm not coming up with an excuse, Dallas's defense still did very well through the postseason and in that final series. There was a lack of offense and consistent offense that really hurt them, but defensively, generally speaking, they were okay. So if your team survived defensively, and it's tough to say survived because they did lose that series in, I think, 5 games, but if your team was solid enough defensively in that series, even with your star guy kind of lagging behind defensively, again, just no justification for moving them away under the guise of we need to get better from a defensive perspective, right? So even if we make this thing about defense, Dallas's primary issue in the finals was not their defense. Was it the best? No, right? But was it like enough for me to say this franchise is not going to get anywhere because of their lack of ability to defend, and that's because of Luka Doncic? Cannot make that statement at all. That team defense was still well off enough, even with Luka struggling at points in time throughout that series. I'm seeing people like come up with these compilations and these clips of Luka's defensive issues in the finals. Those things could be true. He could have struggled defensively, but again, that Dallas defense generally did a solid enough job against Boston. Didn't let Jason Tatum get into any consistent rhythm throughout that entire series. So again, just trying to make this thing about defense. There's no way in the world, there's no argument, there's no conversation where you can make this make sense through the guise of, hey, we need to have a better defensive identity. It just doesn't add up at all. So then now your next question is this, right? Moving on. Where does this all put Dallas right now, right? We have Anthony Davis and we have Kyrie Irving on the same team. This is still a team full of talented guys. This is still a team that has 2 amazing players. So I'm not going to sit here and act like Kyrie isn't an amazing player, because he is. Kyrie should have been an all-star this season, in my opinion. Kyrie Irving is still one of the 3 best, maybe 2 best, maybe best shot creator in the entire game right now. He's definitely up there, and he's one of the best of all time, still doing it. You also have Anthony Davis, who is having a great season, defensive player of the year, caliber-ish year. Can't really give him the award because the Lakers struggled defensively when he was over there, but still, right? Still Anthony Davis. I know he's hurt for a while, and I don't think he'll be back until after the All-Star break or somewhere close to there, but this is a team that still has 2 All-Star players at the top. So your question now is this: where do they go from here? Can they still truly contend for a title with this particular group? So I'll say my first concern with this team is you have to completely revitalize and change and adjust this offensive identity. You'll still have this dynamic of this elite shot creating from Kyrie. He's still one of the best, as I said, shot creators in the entire league. But you're also going to be playing a lot more through the mid post. So that's less pick and roll stuff that we would see all the time with Luka doing it with like Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively. You're running a lot more of your offense through the mid post. So this is going to come with a complete shift in offensive philosophy. Less pick and rolls. You're also, even if you run them, going to be less effective because Luka Doncic is one of the greatest pick and roll threats, probably the best pick and roll threat with the ball in his hands in the entire league. So now you also have to eliminate a major chunk of what made your offense click and why this team was built the way it was in the first place. Generally, they're going to surround Luka with like 4 guys who can stretch the floor. If not 4, maybe 3, and they'll have like a big who can roll really hard like Lively or Gafford. But the team was built for a high volume of pick and rolls. You are not going to do that as much with Anthony Davis here and the touches that he requires in order for him to get like his 25, 26 points per game. And also, they just don't have anybody who's a playmaker quite like Luka. So it's going to be tough to replace that. So a massive chunk of what made your offense work is now gone. Does that mean the new look offense is going to be bad? No, right? And there are going to be some issues with it, and I'm going to talk about in a second, but you have to completely change and adjust and revitalize your offense, and you're already having issues from a health standpoint, right? So you're having to completely adjust your offense to fit Anthony Davis. That's tough to have an offense that clicks if Anthony Davis is going to be in and out of the lineup. I mentioned it before. He is currently injured. Kyrie has not been the healthiest this season. So trying to change and shift a new look offense while having your key guys possibly in and out of the roster, that is a recipe for disaster. And we saw that even last season with the Suns. They can never make that offense truly click because Beal, Booker, and Durant were simply just never on the court together. And you do also worry about spacing, right? So now your starting lineup is potentially, when everybody's healthy, going to be Kyrie, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, and Derek Lively. This is a team that's now running 2 non-shooters on the floor. Derek Lively is not a three-point shooter at all. And Anthony Davis, despite aesthetically looking like a good three-point shooter, has not been great from 3 over the last few seasons. You're running with 2 non-floor spacers at this particular point in time. Maybe Anthony Davis can make defenders respect it and come out there and guard him, but he's not been a massive threat from 3-point range when we kind of look up and add the percentages together. So spacing is going to be an issue for this team. And again, that is one of the things that made Dallas click throughout that time where Luka was there, which was like literally about a couple of months ago when he was back and healthy, right? So there's another dynamic you kind of lost. Pick and roll stuff is gone, but also some of the spacing is going to look very weird, especially late in games. You're going to want to close games out with both AD and Derek Lively on the floor. If you think defense is that important, then you're going to go with your best defensive lineup to close out games. And the issue with that is your best defensive lineup is going to come at a sacrifice of floor spacing. And you can get tic-tacky here, and coaches can play around with the lineups and call timeouts at the end of the game in the fourth quarter and all of that stuff. But essentially, a big chunk of this team's offense is now gone, with the pick and roll stuff being non-existent and possibly being non-existent moving forward, and also the lack of floor spacing now that you're probably going to be running 2 non-shooters on the floor, particularly 2 non-shooters as big men. And I said this before, and I'm going to say it again. The playmaking, man, you're not replacing that. You're not going to find another playmaker like Luka Doncic, right? You can go and find a guy. He can be solid enough, but Luka's one of the best playmakers we've seen in a literal long time. Losing Luka means you lose a generational playmaker and passer. He does some things that are unbelievable. He's one of the best at making plays out of his own ability to shot create, making these like wing-to-wing skip passes. Everybody can't make the plays that Luka Doncic can make. So we're just talking about losing him as a franchise player. Think about the specific things that you're losing when you lose a franchise guy that you can't replace. You can't replace that level of playmaking, and that's just something that's going to look weird for them moving into the postseason. As we get also throughout the regular season, is what does playmaking, consistent playmaking, look like here moving forward? Kyrie can do it, but not at a high volume, not quite like Luka can. That never was something that he was amazing at. And that's kind of a theme we've seen so far here with these big time trades that just happened. Teams are giving up a lot, and they're losing point guards, and they're losing playmaking, right? And they're losing ball dominant orchestrator type of guys. Like the Kings gave up De'Aaron Fox, and right now they don't have a point guard in that starting lineup. That's Zach LaVine, Malik Monk, and DeMar DeRozan. The coach can get creative and say, hey, DeMar, play point guard, but that doesn't mean it's effective and the most effective for your team moving forward. So we've seen that happen a couple of times here with the Kings, and also we're seeing it happen here with the Dallas Mavericks. There's just a lack of consistent playmaking now that Luka is gone. And again, as I said, he's irreplaceable as a playmaker. You're not going to find another playmaker like a Luka Doncic. So AD and Kyrie on paper seems like an amazing fit. I think it would be an amazing fit. I don't see there being chemistry or fit issues between those two guys, but it's about sustainability in the postseason. That's what it's about. And your question is, what is a sustainable offense with these two and their current situation and current set of tools? What does that look like? Now, there is upside to this. To Nico Harris's point, defensively, I love where they're at, right? AD wanted another big man in LA to bolster that team defense, and he's in a situation where you have 2 really good big men to kind of help you out a bit to bolster your defense with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Both guys are amazing rim protectors. Derek Lively is one of the best rim protectors in the entire league right now. Really good, versatile defender as well. He was so valuable for that team in the playoffs last year. So you have that. I think that team defense is going to be just fine. I think when it's all said and done, they may end the season with their healthiest lineup as one of the better defensive groups in the entire league. I don't see a team that has Anthony Davis and Derek Lively on the floor at the same time not being an elite level defensive squad. So there is going to be that, right? But I said this again. Defense wins championships in tandem with a great offense. It is not one or the other. I don't know why we still have coaches that think it is one thing or the other. There have been coaches that think it's just offense, and if we score more, we're going to win. It's true in theory, but you got to be able to defend, and vice versa. Yes, you got to be able to get stops, but if you cannot convert on those stops, what does it mean? Think about the concept of a block shot. Yes, I got the block, right? But how did I get that block shot? What happened after that block? If I kept it in bounds, that creates more of a benefit for my team because now we can go and generate offense. If I just block the shot out of bounds, well, now that team gets to kind of reset a bit. Maybe there's less time on the shot clock, but they still have another chance to organize a possession for themselves, right? So those things work in tandem with each other. It's not just one or the other. So what Harrison said, in theory, didn't make the most sense. And also, too, again, I'm going to say this again, trying to say that to cover up the fact that you traded away Luka Doncic just doesn't make sense at all. But we'll see what ends up happening, right? I'm entertained and I'm intrigued by the move. And you love seeing these moves happen. They're good for like NBA discourse and all of that stuff. But I want to see how this affects Dallas moving forward. Because, again, you're not replacing Luka. You did give up a 25-year-old guy who's the future of your franchise for a guy who's, I think, 32 right now, kind of on the back end of his prime, is questionable from a health standpoint still. I mean, that's always going to be a question with AD, even though generally he has been healthy over the last few seasons. So we'll see what ends up happening, right? It'll be interesting, but I'm just not a fan of this for Dallas. Again, it's not because I don't think Kyrie and AD can't do anything together, but you gave that up. You gave your franchise guy for such a question mark right now. You got worse offensively, cut off massive chunks of your offense. You got to worry about health while trying to build this offense back up and make it work. It's going to be a tough road. I'm not completely counting them out because I don't want to do that, but we'll see what ends up happening as AD gets back and healthy and we see all these guys back on the court together. But it'll be a very interesting next few months here for the Dallas Mavericks as they are trying to get back on that championship contending track that they were on just last season.